Good evening and welcome to this Association of Colleges webinar. Tonight we are talking about the AoC Beacon Awards, which are in their 22nd year of recognising and rewarding outstanding teaching and learning practice in further education colleges. The awards are respected and valued by colleges as they identify innovative and imaginative ways colleges are supporting their students, staff and communities. The webinar tonight is being led by Roger Marriott, the Chief Assessor for the awards. He's going to give us a brief overview of the awards in terms of their purpose and background and highlight the key benefits for applying for a Beacon Award. The bulk of the webinar tonight will focus on practical guidance on applying, as well as an overview of the assessment arrangements. And there will also be an opportunity for question and answers at the end of the presentation. Roger has an illustrious background. He's been the Chief Assessor of the AoC Beacon Awards for the past 6 years. Prior to that, he sat on the Beacon Awards steering group as National Director of Quality with the Learning and Skills Council. And during his time as Chief Assessor, Roger has been involved in ensuring the assessment process for Beacon Awards is robust, transparent and credible. Roger's got extensive experience of further education as a National Director with the NRC, as we've already said, an inspector, a lecturer and a manager, managing and leading development of FE and HE curricula. He's also a member of the Corporation of Bedford College and a member of the panel for the Queen's Anniversary Awards to Further and Higher Education. So Roger, welcome. Tell us something about the Beacon Awards.
Well, thank you very much, David, and good evening, everyone. Well, I'm very pleased to be here to talk about the Beacon Awards, which, as David said, have been running for 22 years. And over that period of time, what the Beacon Awards have done is really to highlight the breadth and quality of education in further education colleges and identifying what is exemplary practice in colleges, particularly in respect of teaching and learning and the support for students. They do promote and celebrate FE across the sector, and an important part of the awards is the dissemination of good practice. And as well as that, the prize associated with the awards does support the further development of a project or initiative that is the subject of an application for the awards. So
that's really helpful, Roger. So perhaps just give us some background about how many awards they've been over the past 20 years, 22 years or more, and what those benefits are.
Well, typically, David, we have a profile of, in this year, 14 awards, and that's fairly typical. In some years, we've had more awards, and they range over all aspects of FE practice, from governance to practical teaching and learning, to the way in which colleges relate to their employer community and support the development and acquisition of skills. So over that time of 22 years, there have been 465 awards that have been given to 209 colleges, and through sponsorship, and each of the separate awards is sponsored by an organisation which has typically an interest in further education. Through sponsorship, that has provided over £1.5 million in supporting the further development of good practice in further education and disseminating that practice.
Which is great, and from those figures it's quite clear that a significant number of colleges have had the benefit from this. Those awards have been widely spread, which evidences how much excellence there is in a whole range of practice. But again, clearly those 209 colleges that have won awards have obviously seen benefits from applying, but perhaps you can say a little bit more about why colleges should be applying for this year.
Yes, I think colleges apply for a variety of reasons, but the feedback that we get from colleges is the tremendous boost that it gives to those parts of the college community that are responsible for the submission. Very often a project or initiative relates to not necessarily the whole college, but a particular curriculum area or a particular initiative or aspect of provision. And the feedback that we get from colleges that have applied is the boost that it gives to their confidence and the publicity that it gives to the institution within their local community. As part of the awards, one of the important aspects of it is that each award-winning college is required to host a local presentation ceremony to which members of the press are invited, and a presentation of the prize, the cheque, is made, and that of course gives a tremendous amount of publicity both locally and more widely to colleges. There's quite an extensive publicity campaign which is managed by the awards office, both nationally and locally. Colleges are invited to a national presentation day, and typically the presentations at the national day are made by a minister. Colleges are also invited to make a presentation at the AoC annual conference, principally to disseminate the good practice of the award and make other colleges aware of what they're doing.
And that's certainly been the case. I mean, in my area of governance, certainly there was a great workshop at AoC conference that Abingdon and Whitney College hosted this year, and I know from the national awards as well, from the ministerial presence we had there, and from not only ministers but shadow spokesmen, members of the House of Lords and others, the extent to which there are so many people there to support and champion that good practice. I think what we're now going to see is a couple of short clips that really evidence more those benefits of applying.
Okay, my name's Catherine Rudd. I'm Principal at the National Staff College.
And I'm Fiona Boise. I'm Assistant Principal at National Staff College.
And the award we won is for Outstanding Leadership of Improvement. I think that people have a perception that unless you're a really big college, you can't apply for it. And I particularly like to say to independent specialist colleges out there, get out there, show people what you can do and all the fabulous things that you and your students are doing.
Our students are at the heart of what we do, and they were at the heart of getting this Beacon Award. They were first on with the assessors. They wowed the assessors because we've got some amazing young people that work with us, and they help us run the college. So we'll be going back to celebrate with them.
So that was a clip from National Star College, which is a small college which really boosted its profile as a result of winning one of these awards. And now, next we're going to go and see a clip from Lord Willis, who former FE spokesman for the Liberal Democrats, who also illustrates why the awards are so important.
Lord Willis, the President of the Association of Colleges Charitable Trust. Well, I think I've learned three things. I mean, first of all, that there are some inspirational college leaders across the whole of the United Kingdom. I think secondly, that the college sector is more innovative now than it has ever been since it began. And thirdly, that as far as students are concerned and the skills base of tomorrow, it's not just an add-on extra, it's absolutely fundamental to Britain's future success. Well, I think any award which seeks out excellence does two things. I mean, first of all, it actually encourages people to look at what they're doing in a very critical way, but a self-critical way. But it also makes them look at resolving a problem, because every one of the awards is actually addressing a need within that college. So I think those two things together actually enhance the student experience. I think 20 years ago, the Beacon Award was exactly what it was. It was, if you like, a mini Oscar for something which was very well done within the college, and there were some great things there. What it's now is actually transformational. But what we're actually seeing with this year's awards is that most of them are not just simply an end point, they're actually part of a journey, and that journey is actually taking the college, the students and the staff into new territories, and I find that hugely exciting. I think the award that stood out most for me is the Northwest College in Northern Ireland. You know, here's a troubled community, and here was a college which actually said, why are our young people having to go across to the mainland in order to be able to work? And what it did was to look around at what were the inherent skills within the area, which were basically science and technology. Farming is actually bred on science and technology, and actually created entrepreneurship using science and technology in an inspirational way, which has changed government policy across the whole of the United Kingdom.
Right, so Roger, those clips show advocates for the awards there, both from colleges themselves and from those in governance and the wider sector that demonstrate why they're important. But, I suppose it's all well and good to say that colleges should apply, but what sort of project should colleges be considering when they're putting themselves in for an award? What's the sort of thing that captures the eye of the assessor panel?
Well, the awards are organised into 3 categories, which are very broad, and the prospectus gives the details of the range of awards in the current year, and the prospectus can be found online. Essentially, there's a very wide scope. I'm tempted to say that virtually any project or initiative that an institution, the college, feels is actually giving increased benefit to students in terms of improving the quality of their teaching and learning and improving the quality of student outcomes is a suitable project or initiative to be put forward for an award. Whether that be a project which is directly related to practical teaching and learning, for example, or whether it's a project which relates to the way in which the institution has gone about improving student outcomes from a position perhaps of being satisfactory or needing improvement to a position of being outstanding, whereby the student outcomes are significantly better as a result of the project or initiative. So there's a wide range of aspects of further education, and the awards attempt to cover all that range of provision that is made within further education colleges.
Great. But there are obviously some general criteria which are here on the slide, which just need to be taken into account for any, and these are true for all general Beacon Awards. So you've got 6 criteria there, as you said. And again, just perhaps a word on sponsors' criteria, because obviously we have a number of sponsors for these, so they obviously have their own criteria as well. Do they tend to be focusing on that particular sector or particular approach?
The sponsors' criteria relate to the specific award. I mentioned that this year there are 14 awards, so each of those awards has a different set of specific criteria relating to the nature of the award. But it is important that applicants look at both the Beacon criteria, the general Beacon criteria that relate to all of the awards, and also the sponsors' criteria, which are specific.
Yeah. Well, that's great in terms of what sort of awards we're talking about. I suppose the next most obvious thing was as well, how do you go about applying? There's currently about a month to go before the deadline for the awards this year, so what would you need to do to put together a strong application? What advice would you give to colleges who are considering this?
The prospectus gives details about the requirements for application, and substantially these are in 3 parts. And it's important that the first part of the application, which is on a standard form, is the only part of the application that contains any information that can identify the colleges. Because when assessors are looking at the applications, we really want the applications to be assessed anonymously. So there's part 1 of the application which deals with details of the college, key contact names. Then the second part of the application, which is also on a standard form contained within the prospectus, requires the colleges to state how that particular initiative or project actually meets the Beacon criteria. So each of those criteria, we look for something like 100 to 150 words, which provides an indication of the evidence that the college is able to provide to demonstrate that it actually does fulfil the criteria, for example, the promotion of equality and diversity, an important general criteria that we would look to all initiatives meeting that requirement of promoting equality and diversity in relation to students and in relation to the community that the colleges serve. And then the third part of the application, it really addresses the specific sponsors' criteria. And that's the part which should be give detail about the particular project.
So tell me a little bit more about part 3, Roger, and what that should include.
essentially what the colleges need to do here is to provide sufficient information to enable an assessor to gain an understanding of what the project aims and objectives are, how it meets the sponsor's criteria, and very significantly what benefits it has produced for learners. How has the project improved the quality of the learning experience? In addition to that, we are clearly interested in knowing how the project is managed, particularly how the project is evaluated and how that evaluation has supported its development, and then finally what other colleges would gain from a knowledge of that particular initiative or project.
And that dissemination point is a key one, isn't it, Roger, not only for the college that's successful itself in terms of being able to show that it's a leader in this particular area, but also that key criteria about sharing best practice, which is actually at the heart of these awards.
Yes, that's absolutely right, and that's really one of the reasons why we are very keen that colleges that do win the award have an opportunity to make a presentation at the AoC annual conference each year, and also have the opportunity and to disseminate that project amongst to other colleges. And indeed, one of the reasons for the award money, the prize money, is to support colleges in that dissemination activity.
Yeah. It's worth pointing on this slide as well, I mean, it's worth emphasising on this, is it rightly said, that these submissions checked anonymously before being sent to the assessors. The assessors are only judging on the strength of the application, not in any way on which college is applying, so it's completely blind when it comes to assessing the quality of the project.
Yes, that's absolutely right, David, and part of the reason for that is that we don't want assessors to be in any way biased by other information that may be around about the college. And the example that I often quote is that you may well have a college which is deemed to be satisfactory as a result of an Ofsted inspection, but nevertheless there could well be a particular area, a particular curriculum area, a particular initiative within that college which is absolutely outstanding, and therefore I think it would be unfair to judge that particular initiative in relation to the whole college. So that's part of the reason for the anonymity, that it gives assessors a completely unbiased position and to be able to assess the submission on its merits.
Which is great. And just to emphasise, bottom of that slide, the closing date for submissions is the 8th of July. And what time is it on the 8th of July, Roger, is it? What time of day are we looking at? Well,
I think as long as the submissions get to the awards office by the 8th of July, we are happy with that.
Well, that's useful guidance as well. So just going on again, we've talked a little around what the process is. We did a little before mention what a strong application would look like, and clearly it's in anyone who's applying to interest to put in as strong an application as they can. So just really using these points, or just really emphasising what assessors will be looking for in a strong application.
Okay, I think it's important to provide information to applicants about how best they can improve their chances of actually being shortlisted for the award and indeed win an award. And there are two sources of that information. One is in the assessment handbook, which is online, but also there is a Chief Assessor's annual report, which also provides an analysis of strengths and weaknesses of applications in last year for each of the awards. On the slide here, we've illustrated some of the key things, and clearly, at the heart of this is that what the submission needs to do is to illustrate how teaching and learning is exemplary, how it is different from the norm in further education. We're looking for something which is beyond the norm, which other colleges can actually learn from. It's important to include indicative evidence in the submission, and in some cases that would be include quotes from students, quotes from employers, and also what is often not done particularly well is to provide clear data on student outcomes, on the achievements of students and the progression. What helps assessors enormously is if the applications, the submissions, do explicitly address the criteria, rather than give us a sort of stream of consciousness approach to the project, but actually pick out each of the criteria that the sponsors have identified and explain how the initiative actually meets those criteria. What is the evidence that that criteria has been met by this project, and how has that benefited students directly?
That's really helpful. I mean, that's almost suggesting treat it like a job application for your college's project. You know, how you're answering the criteria, how you're answering the spec, more than anything else. That's all useful in terms of what a strong application looks like. I think now, you know, there's clearly a process and there are a number of stages. That's the first stage, is to apply. So again, looking at those stages of assessment, Roger, just talk us through these a little.
There are three stages I've identified there. Once the applications are received by the awards office, and the due date this year is the 8th of July, as we've already said, then the awards are considered by assessors, usually by two assessors, a beacon assessor and a sponsors assessor. We do invite sponsoring organisations to nominate someone who will be trained as an assessor and who can take a part in the assessment process. And the first stage is for those assessors to consider each of the applications and to draw up a shortlist of those submissions which best match the criteria. That shortlist is reviewed by myself to ensure that appropriate assessment has been conducted and that the assessment forms have been appropriately and completely filled out. And should that be the case, the shortlist will be approved, and the second stage is for the assessors to contact the college and to arrange for a visit to be made to the college to find out more about the project. If you like, in some cases to fill in some of the gaps. We don't expect the initial submission to cover 100% absolutely everything that might be anticipated, but it clearly has to be sufficiently good to demonstrate that here is a project which is exemplary and has much to offer the rest of the FE sector. So the visit is designed to enable assessors to discuss the project and primarily evaluate the benefit of that initiative to learners. How has this particular project improved the quality of teaching and learning and student outcomes? The assessors, as a result of that visit, will write a report and they will make a recommendation. Typically, we would expect for each award there to be 2 or 3 visits, depending on the number of applications. The assessors make a recommendation. Again, there is a process of quality assurance of review that is conducted to ensure that the assessors' reports sufficiently provide evidence that the recommendation that they're making is appropriate, and their recommendation is then presented to the assessment board. And we have a steering group for the Beacon Awards which acts annually as the assessment board and has the final decision with respect to the making of an award. And
as far as the assessment itself is concerned, I think you've covered much of this already, Roger, but just to emphasise the point, in terms of assessments, you know, this is a completely transparent process that really provides benefit for all those shortlisted colleges.
Yes. The assessment process is supported by documentation at each stage, and therefore, even if a college does not get shortlisted, then there is an opportunity to provide feedback to that college as a result of the reports that the assessors give. And that feedback will typically be available to colleges after the awards are announced at the AoC conference.
So, supposing on that basis, suppose you're fortunate enough to be shortlisted, you know, what happens next?
Okay, having been shortlisted, then it's probably worth saying a little bit more about the visit to shortlisted colleges. It's clearly important that colleges have the opportunity to manage that visit appropriately to ensure that assessors are able to collect any further information that they require and to evaluate the benefits of the project to learners. So assessors will contact the college to discuss a suitable schedule of meetings, to identify who they would like to meet with. Typically the assessment visit would be 4 or 5 hours during the day, so it's a pretty tight time scale, and assessors and the schedule need to be quite effectively managed. Perhaps the important thing to emphasise is that although there will be meetings with stakeholders, obviously teaching staff, and in some cases governors, certainly managers, curriculum managers and senior managers, the most important meetings are those with learners. Because what we're looking at is what are the benefits of the project to learners, and so the focus of the visit will be on the impact of the project on learners and learning. And despite many opportunities for teaching staff to promote their project, it's really important to recognise that learners are the best advocates. They are the people that really need to be beneficiaries of the initiative to improve the quality of what is done to support them in achieving their aims.
Yeah, and you're entirely right, Roger, and very often it's the enthusiasm that you get from students and the insights they provide, really are the things that bring these awards to life. With regard to the visit, it's just worth pointing out what, if you're a shortlisted college, what it is that you really need to get across on that visit to the assessors.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's important also to recognise that the assessors have your submission, they have all of that information. It's not necessary to go over that. What assessors are looking for is to, as I've indicated, fill in the gaps. But they're also looking for the college to be very clear about what they think is the best practice, to highlight the best practice, to be very clear about the outcomes, and to have an additional opportunity to provide further evidence from stakeholders, from learners, and from teaching staff and managers within the college.
Yeah. And the last line there, which you already said, it bears repeating. Learners really are your best advocates for these. It's also worth just checking. We've talked a little bit about assessors and who and what assessors do, but it might help those who are listening tonight to understand perhaps a little more about who the assessors are, and what qualifies them to help basically make these judgments on the quality provision for the purpose of the Beacon Awards.
Yeah, we have a register of, I think, around about 30 assessors. And we look for assessors to have a wide experience of further education, a real in-depth understanding of further education in all its different forms. But in order to ensure that our assessors are up to date, people who are involved in the FE sector, those colleges that win an award are invited to nominate a member of their winning team to apply to be an AoC Beacon assessor. And each year we have a number of new assessors who are trained and work with an experienced assessor in their first year, and then subsequently contribute to the assessment process as a lead Beacon assessor. In addition to the Beacon assessors, we also invite sponsors to nominate a representative or an assessor to support the assessment process. And where sponsors or representatives are able to attend the training, then they are able to take a full part in the assessment process, and they provide a valuable additional aspect to the assessment process from the perspective of the sponsor, and of course their understanding of the specific sponsor's criteria that relate to the award.
Again, that's really helpful in terms of the background, and that's an added bonus for a college that wins, so that they can become involved in the process and help develop their own staff. So, if a college is fortunate enough to win, what can they expect? What are the benefits to them?
Well, I think, David, we've probably covered most of these already, and there is a considerable amount of publicity that colleges gain as a result of winning a Beacon Award, not just at the AoC conference, but I think, as I've indicated, through press releases nationally and locally. There's a significant radio campaign that is organised at the time of the announcement of the awards at the AoC conference. So in terms of PR, there are, I think, enormous benefits of winning the award. But I think also one of the major benefits is that self-esteem that actually those who are associated with winning the award actually get within the college. The opportunity it gives for colleges to actually gain from the insights of the assessment process and an assessor, the feedback that they have that helps them to move forward with their initiative, and gives the opportunity for greater support and benefit to their students.
And it's worth saying, we'll come up with some examples in a moment, but in my own area of governance, the winners last year's Governance Beacon Award, Abingdon and Whitney, I know they've now been used by the Education and Training Foundation who supported the award. They've done a webcast on that. They've provided information which has been shared more widely. I know even one of the shortlisted colleges for that award was invited to address the ministerial recognition event for governors this year. So there are some, it might be media, but it's also about profile and about others within the sector recognising you for the quality of what you've done. I think that's quite well illustrated in the example we're moving on to. So perhaps you could give us a little bit of an example of what Exeter has done with its Edge Award.
Well, Exeter College actually have won a number of awards over the years. This particular award they won in 2011-2012 for a particular initiative related to practical teaching and learning. And I think probably the best thing would be to move on to the quote that was provided by the principal of the college, where he is very clear about what winning a Beacon Award actually meant for his college and the staff who work within the institution.
And I think that's what it comes down to, helping colleges grow in confidence, helping them more prominent, helping them to gain valuable publicity, help the staff to raise their esteem, enjoying national recognition. I mean, what is not to like about that, quite frankly? They're all positive and successful things. And again, an unreserved recommendation there. I mean, we could quote from many other examples of colleges, apart from those we've already done, Roger, on those that are who've benefited from not just winning awards, but through the whole process of awards. And I think it's worth emphasising, as you've said, that whether you're shortlisted or whether you put an application in and of itself, the process is a positive one for colleges. And whilst there's a time amount involved, it actually is a real opportunity for colleges to examine their own practice and examine why they've been successful and how. If you have any other final comments that you'd like to emphasise to colleges about applying, we remind people again the deadline date's the 8th of July.
Yes, that's right. Yep. And I think you're absolutely right. I mean, it's probably worth just referencing the evaluation that colleges complete following the shortlisted colleges visit, and the response from colleges there is positive, and they find the whole process to be one which is helpful in taking them forward in their approaches to improving the quality of provision. And it isn't all about winning. And certainly the example that you quoted with respect to the governance award last year is pretty typical, that all of the shortlisted colleges represent provision which is of a very high calibre, and very often it's a difficult decision for assessors to determine which college should actually win. But the nature of the awards is that there is a winning college, but it's very important to recognise that they're not necessarily the only college that has evidence of good practice, and we do look for all shortlisted colleges to benefit from the awards, and for those who do not manage to get to the shortlist to understand why it is they haven't got to the shortlist and how they can improve their application and their provision and make subsequent applications for an award.
And I'm right in thinking, Roger, that all shortlisted colleges are invited to AoC conference?
Yes, they are actually. The awards are announced at the conference, and they are confidential until that announcement, so that even if you're a shortlisted college, you don't know that you've won the award until the AoC announcement. So we like to invite all shortlisted colleges in recognition of the fact that they are providing an exemplary level of provision for their students, despite the fact that they may not have won the award. Of course, it's a great day for those who do win the award, and there is at the conference there is also a reception which is open to all of those who, all shortlisted colleges to attend.
And then there's the final award ceremony which happens in London, again, several months later.
That's right, a national presentation ceremony at which typically a minister is invited to make the presentations of the awards.
Which is all great, and even more of an opportunity to get some more publicity and some more profile. And on that point, I'd like to thank you, Roger, for that clear exposition of the Beacon Awards, and as they now in their 22nd year, remind everyone again, the 8th of July is the closing date, and now we'll move over to questions. Thank you. Okay, well, thank you everyone for listening so far. Now we'll go over to live question and answer session. In addition to having Roger with us, we're also joined by Alice as well. So welcome to you as the director of the trust and the keeper of the awards. So let's crack on to questions we've received. So we've had a number of questions tonight, all asking some very good points. First off, we've got Hazel Kinley from Ashton Sixth Form College, who's asking, well, do the areas covered by the awards change from year to year? She'd assume that they'll always reflect key priorities for the sector, so there is some consistency. Roger?
Well, thanks very much, Hazel, for the question. What we try to ensure is certainly that all of the awards are relevant to current developments in further education. So every year the awards are reviewed to ensure that they are, as I say, relevant, but secondly to ensure that they are specified in an appropriate way. We do want to have some continuity of awards, so we would expect an award to be offered for at least 2 and probably 3 years as a minimum. Some of the awards, as you'll recognise, have been offered for many more years than that because they are of particular relevance and importance to the sector. And one that is probably one of the longest running awards is the Award for Practical Teaching and Learning, sponsored by the EDGE organisation. And this is quite a popular award and a very important award within the programme.
That's really helpful, Roger. So that's one of the first question we've had in tonight. I should have just said another question that I've just had from Shelley Bratton at Selby College, which was a useful, another useful question as well about the size of the and the format for the awards here. Roger, was can the description, the 3,000-word description, include pictures or video clips? Is that something you want to answer, Alice? Is that something you'd like to clarify a little bit more for everyone?
Yes, thank you for the question. We would encourage you to include pictures within your submission, but the submission does need to be paper-based, and we would expect hard copies to be sent into the office. Where colleges want to include video clips, of course you can provide a link to that online which the assessors could access if they wanted to, but you do need to bear in mind that the application at this stage does need to be anonymous, which means that if your link takes you to your college's website, then that would preclude you from being able to do that. But basically what we're trying to create is a level playing field for all colleges. So whilst photos certainly do bring an application to life, I think it may be more problematic trying to include video clips.
That's really helpful, and it's just worth sort of supplementing from that as well, which we often get asked. You know, the word count for this is 3,000. And, you know, I know that we've been asked in the past, well, what about if I'm 50 or 100 words over? What's the effect of that? I mean, can colleges still submit an application if they think they've got 3,049 words and they can't make it any shorter?
Yes. The answer is really, we're not going to be that draconian about the word limit. However, I think it's worth just saying that if two applications are made and one application is well over the word limit, and I'm talking about 300 or 400 words over the word limit, and there is another application which is in contention for shortlisting, then I think we would have to give preference to the application which was written within the word limit. So we're looking at applications of 3,000 words or very close to 3,000 words.
Again, that's extremely helpful. Okay, well, the questions are coming in quite thick and fast now at the moment. Next question, I think this is really one for you, Roger, is we got this question here, which is an interesting one we've got from Tim Strickland at FE Sussex, principal there. He said, we've talked a lot tonight about teaching and learning and learners. If entering an application is concentrating on a support service, obviously within the criteria of the award, the sponsor's requirements, does that focus on support services rather than teaching and learning reduce a college's chances of success? Good question.
Very good question, Tim. Thank you very much. And the short answer is no. Clearly, any support service is there to help and promote more effective learning by the students within the organisation. And if we're talking about, for example, the provision of an IT system within the college, then clearly that system is there to support and help the learners. I think if we move into some rather more business-focused areas like the financial management of the institution, then it's still possible for a college to put together an application that demonstrates that effective financial management is resulting in more efficient and more effective support for learners. Clearly, without effective financial management, then the institution would not exist for very long. So I think, given that you need to be very careful about which particular award you apply for, I would not see it as being, a bar for any support service. Any activity within an institution clearly is there to support and enable students to succeed and achieve their aims.
Okay, that's extremely helpful. Thank you for that answer. Again, coming in, a very short and sweet question here from Jonathan Hofgartner from Western College of Technology. And he said basically typically how many applications are shortlisted in each category. I suppose the short answer, it depends, isn't it? But
yes, that's right, David. Typically we would expect to receive around about 10 or 12 applications on average for each award, each of the awards. And within that, normally one would anticipate that there would be 2 applications that would be shortlisted from that 10 or 12. The sort of broad guidance that you'll find in the assessment handbook, which is online, gives an indication. If there are more than 15 applications, then we would look to the possibility of having 3 applications shortlisted in that particular case.
Yeah, and again, next question comes from Ashley Grief at South Downs. Says, does it have to be a set project that we submit for, or can it be a gain award for a specific department? For example, I think we're submitting for the Sports Award in this case. So can it be for a department, or does it have to be for a particular project?
Thank you for that question, Ashley. We do struggle actually with the use of language here, and we variously call aspects of further education that make applications for an award projects or initiatives. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a project as such. What we're looking for is an initiative, a development within the FE sector that meets the criteria, both the beacon criteria and the sponsors criteria. So in particular, for the Sport Award, if you look at the sponsors criteria there is a particular emphasis on teaching and learning, and for example, just looking at the criteria, for example, the development of volunteering, teamwork or competitions which encourage students to learn in different ways. So the important thing is that you address the criteria and that you can demonstrate that you have a particular approach which is meeting those criteria and enabling students to benefit from the approach that you've adopted.
I suppose another question that we often get asked in a similar sort of criteria as well, Roger, is if a college is saying, what about if their course isn't the full academic year? If it's only 12 weeks long, say, and therefore they're not actually running for over a full academic year, can they still apply if it's, say, a 12-week or a term-long course?
Yes, absolutely. There's no restriction on the length of the course. The only requirement that we place is that the initiative should have been in operation since the beginning of the academic year in which the application is made. So in other words, it's got to have been running since September 2014 for an application to be made and submitted by the 8th of July this year.
Okay, that's really helpful. Now, an interesting one, we've obviously flagged that anonymity as a question before. We've now got another question here from Sharon Dowling, who's at Henley College, Coventry, said, as you said, the application need to be anonymous. Can colleges still identify the areas and partners they work which may inevitably identify them indirectly, or do these need to be anonymised also? So if they're working with partners, for example, how do we approach this one? Perhaps that's the one for you, Alice.
Yes, thank you very much for that question, Sharon. I think what I'd say is, as far as possible, you would need to anonymise your partners. If you're working with your local authority, then you could say you're working with your local authority partner. If you're working with, say, your local branch of Tesco's, then you can name Tesco's because Tesco's is kind of UK-wide. So basically, just to summarise, you would need to just try and remove any element that could possibly identify your college. I think in some areas it's going to be very, very tricky, and I'd be very happy to discuss that with you over the phone if you wanted to contact me. But generally speaking, as far as possible, if you can anonymise your submission, then it greatly helps the assessment process. And again,
had another very useful question again on that anonymity point, again from James Stainforth at Stroke College, saying, if we're part of the evidence from an Ofsted report, and as a result of that Ofsted report, that might provide a strong indication of the identity of the college. Again, how could that anonymity be best preserved? How would you look at doing that? We say from a third-party approach, such as an Ofsted review. Again, we presumably they anonymise the actual section from the Ofsted report.
Yes, thank you, David, and thank you, James, for that question. This is an interesting question. I think that the way in which you would need to approach that would be to quote from the Ofsted report without identifying the college, and I think that should be possible. Although I would I would advise some caution here. It depends on the nature of the award, and what we frequently do find is that quotes are made from an Ofsted report which relate to the whole college, but don't actually specifically relate to the initiative or project that is the subject of the application. And what assessors would be interested in is how a particular approach to, for example, quality assurance relates to the specific project rather than relates to the whole of the institution. Ofsted reports and quotes from Ofsted reports often refer only to the whole institution. So I think that's the first part of the answer. The second part of the answer is that in the initial application, I think it's important to maintain that anonymity, but clearly if the college were shortlisted, then the assessors will be making a visit and much more information could be made available from the Ofsted report, and then at that stage the anonymity does not apply clearly because the visit is taking place.
Yeah, I mean that's a useful point to make. I mean it's worth emphasising, I think, Roger, and you said this in the webinar as well, the initial application of 3,000 words is to look at getting you to a position where you were shortlisted for a visit. At that point, then the actual visit itself, obviously you take the initial application into account, but it's the visit itself, it's the assessment of the college, it's the assessment of the overall provision, the overall entry that results in an award, or indeed a shortlisting for award, or that approach. So the application is only the first stage of the process.
Yes, that's right. The nature of the application is to provide sufficient information and evidence for assessors to be convinced that the application at least has a very high probability of meeting the assessment criteria, both the Beacon criteria and the sponsors criteria. And then the purpose of the visit is really to confirm that evidence is there, and also to fill any gaps that are apparent from the initial application. It's clearly unreasonable to expect a 3,000-word application to cover all of the ground absolutely completely, and therefore there will be some areas that assessors would want to explore in further detail, and of course indeed to gain first-hand information from both learners and teachers and managers.
Yeah, which is really, again, helpful, and it's worth that emphasis, so thank you very much, Roger. We're going back a little bit more to the mechanics of the application still again, and again, I'm afraid, Alice, I'm going to ask you to answer this one, but the question we've had, again, from Jonathan Hofgartner is, does the text outlining the criteria within the application count towards the 3,000 words?
The short answer to that is no, it doesn't. So the words that you use within parts 1 and parts 2 of the application form don't count towards the 3,000 words. It's just section 3, which is the 3,000 words. If by your question you mean the criteria within the sponsors pages and the Beacon pages, then you could integrate the sponsors criteria as part of addressing that, and in which case those words would be included in the word count. So I hope that's clear.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful, and it's worth pointing out just for this, just one other question that we sometimes get asked also, is, in terms of actually signing off these applications, because the general assumption is that it says in the guidance that it should be usually signed off by a principal, and some colleges have asked us in the past about, well, our principal's going to be away, we've got a deadline at the 8th of July, and whilst I know we encourage early entries, we're realistic to know that actually a lot of entries actually get signed and completed in the last few days. But what happens if your principal happens to be away? Does that bar you from applying?
No, not at all. All we would ask is that the application is signed by a senior member of staff, and if you could submit a covering letter saying that the principal is aware and supportive of the application, then that absolutely covers that off.
That's great. Okay, well, we've had a good range of questions there tonight, I think, so they've been really helpful. I think I'll just finish by answering the question that Lloyd Richards, the Director of Curriculum of Yeovil College, asked, which basically said, can we make sure that we actually broadcast this, or we broadcast the slides, just to reassure everyone who's registered tonight, those people who've both listened with us and listened live, and those who, for whatever reason, haven't been able to make it tonight. We can reassure you that as part of the webinar programme that AoC and particularly AoC Governance puts out, but certainly on this occasion as well, we try to make sure we upload the whole of the webinar, including the questions and answers, ideally within 48 hours, but certainly no later than the end of this week. They will be available on the AoC website, but for everyone who's registered, including those who couldn't make it tonight, we will email you all directly with a direct link for that. That will mean that you have access to the whole webinar and indeed the slides too. And if there's any, and what we'll also do is we'll make sure that there's also a link to, it'll be on the Beacon Awards page, but we'll make sure that there's a link in that email directly to the criteria as well, so that you have everything under one roof, so to speak. So thank you everyone who's called in tonight. Thank you for everyone who submitted a question, and thank you all for listening. And thank you again to you, Roger, and to you, Alice, for the webinar tonight and for explaining the Beacon Awards. And we're sincerely hoping we got 150 applications last year, and we'd like to get more this year. It's really important to raise the profile of the sector and celebrate excellence in the sector, particularly in challenging times. This is a really good way of us demonstrate all of the innovation that's really happening in the sector and FE. So thank you very much, and we'll look forward to seeing some great entries and some great awards at AoC conference, and then eventually at the National Awards. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.